Which metrics really count in AI search? This is a question I'm asked regularly. And at Peec AI, our answer is the following. The number one thing that you need is a set of relevant prompts that you are tracking. And in them, you need to look at visibility, meaning, is your brand mentioned or not? That is your number one metric. And as long as your prompt set is at least directionally correct in terms of representing your business performance, this is the number one thing you should look at. Now, if benchmarking against competitors is very important, something similar to market share is needed, I would go with share of voice, which basically looks at only the chats where competitors are mentioned and then, or your own brand is mentioned, and then gives you the share of your own mentions and then your own brand mentions among all of the brand mentions that are happening. Why is this interesting as a secondary metric in comparison to visibility? Because visibility can be, for a certain prompt set, very low for everyone. If, for example, your competitors are never mentioned, like let's say you have prompts for a problem where you could go with a software or an agency, and you are a software and you compare yourself against other software solutions. If a certain LLM always recommends agencies, all software companies would have very, very low visibility. If you use share of voice, you always have 100% in total. That is the sum of your own share of voice plus all of your competitors. So you get a very realistic representation among your concrete self-chosen competitors, while visibility can also be low when, for example, completely different brands are mentioned or the LLMs just give general advice instead of recommending a concrete recommendation or a concrete brand. In addition to this, you can look at the average rank. Can be interesting, is not always relevant. You can also look at your sentiment. So when your brand is mentioned, how positively or negatively is this? Important, you should always do this together with other competitors. And personally, I would not use it as part of the performance measurement. It has other interesting applications if you look into brand perception, but I personally would not use sentiment as like a main performance metric. Then when we come to the sources, I would look at two things. One is your citation share. So how many of all of the citations that are happening are coming from your own domain? And then the next thing is the source coverage. So if you look at the top source URLs used by the LLMs, which will often not be your own pages, in how many of them is your brand mentioned? If you bring that value up, your brand mentions are also going to increase in the LLM answers. And that's what you get out of prompt tracking in terms of metrics. Then I would also look at clicks from LLMs. There are now over 70 different domains that can send you LLM traffic. I have a little repository on GitHub you can use if you want. It's free to use. Just search for LLM Referrer, where I keep a regularly updated list of currently or historically used domains and subdomains that are sending LLM traffic. And you can use a regular expression or build some form of grouping in Google Analytics to properly attribute your LLM traffic with that. Keep in mind, clicks from LLMs are rare. Like LLMs lead to decisions, but not necessarily to clicks. So you will not get the full picture if you look at clicks. And then the third thing I would look at is my log file with a log file analysis. There I can really see which URLs are really being visited by the AI bots. So it's real data, similar to Google Analytics or whatever web analytics solution you use. But for both of these, you have very little additional context. You don't know the prompts. Yeah, you just see the URL usage. You have no benchmark against competitors. And especially for smaller websites, this is almost useless, I would say, because the data sample is so small that you just cannot make any good decisions based on that. You will always need prompt tracking to actually uncover opportunities for improvement, uncover mistakes that are happening, and also uncover how you're doing versus competitors. Only on very, very large websites can something like log file analysis actually come close to that. Even there, it cannot fully replace it. So that's how I see metrics and LLMs. Thanks for listening.